So recently I got asked a very interesting question as a follow-up to one of my earlier videos about visual impairment. And it struck me that there's a lot more people don't know than I actually realised. I was here in my home, grabbing something from my bedroom, and somebody asked in passing whether or not I have to have the light off to be able to get to sleep. And it suddenly struck me that that's kind of both an obvious and not obvious question simultaneously. Because, it's second nature to sighted people that light and dark is how the circadian rhythm works. Because it is. But the idea that a person could get sleep without a connection to that natural rhythm because they are disconnected from it, I guess it's not second nature if you've not had any exposure to it. So I thought I'd make a video on it. So the basics are this. Humans, not being a nocturnal species, we have a rhythm that is when the sun comes up, we wake. We're then able to function while we can see the light. By and large, a lot of us fight that, especially, young people with rave parties and whatever. And then once the sun goes down, we get tired again and darkness kicks in, so we get drowsy and we sleep until the light comes back. Now, obviously, artificial lighting, energy drinks, food, lots of other factors can make us active for longer. Hormones and lots of other things can play a part. But essentially, light makes you awake, dark makes you sleep. That is the really basic version of how the circadian rhythm for a non-nocturnal species works. It's flipped backwards if you are a nocturnal species. Now, if you're born blind, that's not there. Obviously, if you lose your sight, that's not there either. Although it's more complicated if you lose your sight because you'll have developed that rhythm and then you will have become separated from it. Which is probably the worst of the possible scenarios to have because your body demands it but doesn't get the stimuli it needs. And that's where drugs kick in and all sorts of other really weird shit. But what it means is most blind people can get by on often as low as 4 hours sleep a day in some cases because their bodies aren't telling them it's dark, you must sleep. The payoff, though, as a rather interesting aside, is on average, people born blind have 25% more nightmares and night terrors than people who aren't born blind. Now, with a little bit of a aside here, people who lose their sight also have a increased rate of nightmares and night terrors, but that is a bit of a more fluctuating number because it depends on if you lost your sight through an accident or trauma, and then you're into areas of PTSD and flashbacks and so on. And that's just a whole other murky area. Suffice to say, yeah, I get and need less sleep than the average, but when I do sleep, it's not always a fun experience. Yeah, that just sort of occurred to me that it was something that I take for granted, that people know that I don't need my light off to sleep. And yet there it is, an obvious question being asked that I just had taken as read, you'd all know. So now if you didn't, you do. And I hope that fills in one more blank. And I promise part 3 of the Questions People Ask Me series is coming. I've just had so much on my plate of late that, it's had to take a back seat. Probably we'll have to get a Christmas party out of the way before I get to it, but it will happen, I promise.